The last photograph of Jean Kent shows her standing by the window of a quiet cottage, half in sunlight, half in shadow. To the world, she was the perfect British star of the post-war years. Poised, magnetic, dangerous in all the right ways. But when the cameras stopped rolling, something behind those elegant eyes refused to fade into the role. She had been the woman who played with secrets on screen and perhaps the one who carried them off screen too. Those who worked beside her spoke of a charm edged with silence, a woman who knew too much but never said enough. Then one evening, at the height of her fame, she simply vanished from the public eye. No scandal, no farewell, only whispers that she had overheard things not meant to be heard. Years later, when she was found alone in her home, the headlines called her a forgotten legend. But legends don't forget, and Jean Kent's silence still feels like a warning. What did she know, and why did she choose never to tell? In the years after World War II, Britain's film industry was rebuilding its identity. London studios filled with bright lights and new faces, actors and actresses who would define a wounded nation's idea of glamour. Among them stood Jean Kent, born Joan Mildred Summerfield in London in 1921. Her rise seemed inevitable. A former dancer with hypnotic poise, a face both sharp and soft, and a voice that could freeze or melt a room. Through the late 1940 seconds, she became one of the rank organization's most striking stars, the kind of actress who could make moral conflict look seductive. Films like Caravan, Good Time Girl, and the Browning version turned her into Britain's answer to Hollywood's femme fatale. Yet while her characters wielded power and mystery, the real Jean was retreating into silence. As the press adored her image, colleagues began to notice something else, a distance, a guardedness, as if she knew a secret no one else could touch. In interviews, she spoke carefully, always circling truth but never landing on it. "I've seen too much," she once wrote to a friend, "and I'd rather the curtain stayed closed." Behind the glow of post-war optimism, Jean Kent embodied another Britain, one that understood how beauty could be both weapon and wound. But what waited for her when the spotlight finally dimmed? Jean Kent's story began far from the glittering screens that would later define her. Born Joan Mildred Summerfield to a pair of musical hall performers, she grew up among the scent of grease paint and the echo of applause. The stage was her inheritance, but also her education in illusion. By 16, she was dancing in London revues, her movements sharp and deliberate, every gesture hiding nerves behind control. The war years changed everything. Britain needed distraction, and cinema became its sanctuary. Jean was noticed by a rank scout while performing on stage a moment that would alter her fate forever. Soon she was standing beneath the hot studio lamps of denim, her face powdered, her voice trembling as the director called action. That first film, It Always Rains on Sunday, 1947, revealed something uncanny about her screen presence. She didn't act mystery. She was mystery. Audiences were drawn to her contradictions, elegance fused with danger, a softness that could harden in an instant. Critics compared her to the noir icons of America, but she was something else. A distinctly British enigma, poised between restraint and rebellion. She didn't seduce the camera, she tested it. By the late 1940 seconds, Jean Kent had become one of Britain's most bankable faces. Her image, the arched brow, the cold stare softened by a hesitant smile symbolized a generation's fascination with strength wrapped in silence. Yet behind her rise, she was already learning what fame could not protect her from. The eyes that never looked away, and the truths whispered only after the lights went out. Fame came swiftly, and with it, the quiet suffocation of being watched. By 1950, Jean Kent was no longer just an actress, she was an idea. Her portraits hung in studio corridors, her face printed on glossy covers promising the dangerous beauty of British cinema, but beneath the poise, she felt the walls closing in. Every movement, every smile, every word she spoke in interviews was rehearsed, filtered through what the rank organization wanted her to be. The public adored her as the perfect contradiction, poised yet passionate, moral yet forbidden. Yet in that admiration was control. The same industry that had created her image now owned it every dress, every rumor, every photograph approved or buried by unseen hands. Those who knew her closely said she grew cautious, listening more than speaking, often glancing around as if rooms had ears. There were whispers of evenings at private studio parties where deals and careers were traded over champagne. Jean attended few, and when she did, she was an observer, elegant, distant, absorbing every conversation. One assistant recalled her saying softly, "I've seen things that could end people." The comment was half a jest, but her tone lingered. Her fame demanded charm, but her silence made her dangerous. Directors began to notice the tension between her lines, an authenticity that couldn't be faked. It made her unforgettable on screen, and perhaps unsettling off it. In an industry built on pretending, Jean Kent had learned the most perilous truth of all. Sometimes knowing what's real can end a career faster than any scandal. It happened quietly, not with scandal or disgrace, but with absence. One year, her name was everywhere. Billboards, premieres, magazine columns. The next, it was gone. Scripts stopped arriving, invitations dwindled, and the same industry that had crowned her its starlet now acted as if she had never existed. Rumors filled the silence. Some said she had angered the studio executives after a late-night party where a careless truth was overheard. Others whispered of a private argument with a producer who held too much power and too little conscience. But nothing was ever confirmed, only the sudden disappearance of Jean Kent from the film schedules of Rank and Denham. She withdrew without complaint. No interviews, no denials, not even a farewell column. It was as if she had stepped out of her own film, mid-scene. In later letters to friends, she hinted at betrayal. "There are things best left unspoken," she wrote. "The business remembers what it wants and forgets what it must." Those who once praised her began to avoid her name. Those who admired her work spoke in the past tense. The silence became her shield, and perhaps her sentence. For a woman who had mastered the art of secrecy on screen, she now lived inside her own, a life framed not by spotlight, but by everything that light refused to touch. In the years that followed, Jean Kent slipped quietly into a life few could imagine for a former star. She moved to a modest cottage in Suffolk with her husband, actor Just Sargent, and the two retreated almost completely from the public eye. When he passed away, her world grew smaller still. Neighbors spoke of curtains that rarely opened, of lights that flickered late at night, perhaps an old projector casting ghostly scenes across the walls. Reporters tried, from time to time, to reach her. Letters went unanswered, interviews declined. "I've already said everything worth saying," she wrote once, "just not in words." There was an elegance in her withdrawal, a discipline that felt almost like defiance. Years drifted into decades. The industry changed, faces replaced faces, but Jean Kent remained untouched, a relic from an era that had chosen to forget its own sins. When news finally broke in 2013 that she had been found after a fall at her home, the headlines called her the last of the rank starlets. Yet there was something haunting in that phrase, as if she had outlived not only her peers but the silence itself. Her passing was quiet, almost poetic. No public mourning, no grand farewell, just the echo of a name once spoken with reverence. To the world, it was the end of a story. But to those who understood the cost of silence, it felt like the final act of a woman who chose truth over applause. Today, Jean Kent's name surfaces only in passing, a footnote in histories of post-war British cinema. Yet her legacy lingers in every frame she left behind. Watch her eyes in Good Time Girl or the Browning version, and you'll see something the era wasn't ready to confront. A woman who understood the price of power and the loneliness that came with it. To younger audiences discovering her work, Jean feels startlingly modern. She played women who refused to be tamed, complex, wounded, self-aware long before such roles were written with sympathy. Colleagues once described her as a mirror that reflected what others didn't want to see. Perhaps that's why the industry turned away. Film scholars now look back and recognize her restraint as rebellion. She didn't shout her truth. She guarded it. And in doing so, she exposed how deeply British cinema depended on silence, on actresses who obeyed, smiled, and never told what they saw behind the lens. Jean Kent may have vanished from the spotlight, but her quiet defiance remains. She reminds us that every era has its secrets and every performer, its unseen strength. Her story endures not through scandal or spectacle, but through something rarer, dignity in the dark. Jean Kent's life is a study in contrasts, brilliance and restraint, beauty and silence, fame and disappearance. She once embodied the allure of post-war cinema, yet her greatest performance may have been the one the world never saw, the act of vanishing on her own terms. In the glow of studio lights, she appeared untouchable. But behind the soft focus and silver reels was a woman who understood too much about how illusion works, how easily admiration turns to control, how quickly truth becomes inconvenience. When others chased immortality through fame, she chose anonymity as her final statement. Her story reminds us that the brightest stars often carry the deepest shadows. The industry she helped shape moved on, but the question she left behind still lingers, flickering like an unfinished scene. What does it cost to know the truth and survive it? Because sometimes the greatest courage isn't in speaking out, it's in walking away before the light burns you whole. Her name may have faded from the marquees, but her silence still echoes through the corridors of British cinema. If you've ever watched Jean Kent and felt that flicker of mystery, that sense she knew something no one else dared to say, you've already glimpsed her truth. Which of her performances stayed with you the most? And what do you think she chose to keep hidden behind that quiet smile? Like, comment, and subscribe to keep her story alive.